Yeah. So, I mean, this is what it's all about. And the spiritual side, in the way I look at it, it's a bunch of things. It's the virtues that we live by. It's our relationship with our creator. It is an awareness that people aren't physical, they're spiritual. When somebody steals something from you and they return it, you get the physical thing back, but you're still wounded, right? There has to be a spiritual forgiveness in order to get past that. There has to be a spiritual understanding. And so I love that we're going first with the spiritual. Um, Personally, for me, my spiritual mission statement is to be a conduit for God's glory. And so that means I have to be in harmony with what I believe Christ taught. I have to walk that out. I have to live that out. And my bigger overarching mission statement is to create the atmosphere that allows you to become the person God created you to become. And so in the spiritual sense, not only do I have to walk it out so that you, when you're around me or interact with me, you're like, hey, I want more of that. But my standard is the highest standard. It's God's standard. And it's a constant striving for that, because we all go through life. We all have things that preoccupy us. And so how do you nurture that? That's a daily commitment. That's a conversation. And I use this story when Alexandra was a kid, 5 or 6 years old. She would sometimes she would just come and sit in my lap. And about a minute later, I would say, why are you in my lap? And she would say, oh, I just want to be in your lap. Can I have some candy? And I knew I was being played. And sometimes she would sit in my lap, and then I would say, why are you in my lap? And she'd say, because I want to be next to you. I want to be close to you. And I think from a spiritual context, when we talk about our faith and our relationship with God, I think that's the way we got to approach it. We just want to get closer. We want to get deeper. We use those words. And so when you invest time every day to build that, it's not about it's not a motive that says, I got to check the box that said I did this today. It's a longing for connection. Yeah. And how am I growing closer? And then, of course, Dad said that the number one reason for his success was character and integrity. Well, those are spiritual virtues. Those are qualities, right? And so how do we live that out?
Randy? And you both just look at me to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you better that?
No, but thank you. And
yeah.
I agree. And then how do you say words? And I'm so grateful for being in a place, in a time, and I don't get the opportunity to chew on these words with you, Tom, all the time, but 2022, and on that spiritual spoke, and grateful in my 50s at brand new 54, being able to express some of the confidence, I think maybe in Jesus, and that has come through presence, time, rhythm, and being one of those people that for many, many years, even in my 20s, or if we go back that far, let's not do teens, but I never, and probably none of us ever approached a time with God as a to-do, as a check the box. There was always that relatively mature thought process of I crave relationship, I crave connection. But I think part of the blessing of time and rhythm and wisdom and maybe pain over the years is I'm able to sense an increasing confidence in my that I want to be in his lap, to just be in his lap, and that I'm in the past I would have been less trusting of my motives, and now I'm more trusting of my motive, that I don't want just can't I really don't just want some candy from God. And I know pain is coming, I know challenge is coming, I know striving is there, and I'm grateful to be in that place of not full connection, but connecting more to where there's a sense of trajectory and increasing confidence in my security in this life. And the phrase I wrote down this week as we were preparing for this was, I feel less of a striving to secure my place in life through all the other spokes, career, marriage, and those things, because I am secure. And so that has become the spiritual spoke, I guess, at least at this on a Friday in May and in the summertime. And I hope that in June, in next week, it'll be a little bit different and a little bit better, a little bit more confidence and a little bit more eagerness for the future and confidence in that future.
I got to say on this one, before I was going to say the fad, that's a bad word. It sounds negative, but before the publicity of the morning routine, right? We've got Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning and Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. club and starting your day off right, that both of you guys were influences on me with that morning routine of primarily being in the word, of pursuing your spiritual lives. I mean, we would meet for coffee, Randy, and you'd pull out your journal about what you had been pondering with God that morning, and seeing that and seeing the fruit of that and the fruit in your spirit that got me into a better morning routine and seeking my spiritual foundation. First thing off, probably more than any other influence, and both of you guys in that. It's interesting that you mentioned the word confidence. You said it twice, and you said secure as well, because I met with one of our good friends recently, Patrick, and I didn't tell you about it. We had a long talk on spirituality, and he mentioned the word confidence, and I kind of pushed back on him a little bit because I find myself pushing back somewhat on certainty.
Okay.
Which you guys were just talking before we started recording about absolute truth, and,
Right.
and I think we've done spirituality poor in the context of religion with these aspects of certainty. We're certain about these things, but confidence, and he kind of backed up and then unpacked it, but he felt a peace in his own soul, in regards to his relationship with God and how he perceived that, and in that a confidence. And I like that, but I wanted to separate that because I think knowing you, confidence doesn't mean certainty.
Right.
Yeah.
I over the past recent time, when a word like that comes up, I'll Google it and get into the etymology.
Yeah,
Did
totally.
you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So how would you say confidere? What was your translation?
You said the word secure. That's a good word to go along with it. That's probably a synonym, for that, and a couple of different definitions, but it wasn't a certainty, but I think we associate that.
Well, that's why I want to pin you down on what's the Latin root words.
Oh, I don't know.
So confidence, con means with, like in Spanish.
Okay.
Con, like chili con carne. And fidere means faith.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So faith.
Okay. That's faith, which is not certainty, but it's
exactly.
Okay.
But it's as close to certainty as you can get. I'm still going to place my life on this.
Yeah.
But not with, the struggle for me now is also because I think my main idol or my main struggle would be to place too much security in wealth.
Yeah. That's good. I'm going to steal the word security. So, in responding to it myself, mine was pretty tactile as I looked at this. And I thought, man, a big part of
wait, your spiritual
no, this
spoke
my
is
answer. No,
tactile.
my answer right here. This first answer to how, kind of how do what is a value I have in a spiritual sense? It is somewhat of a comfort aspect of, I mean, not comfort, a security of feeling like realizing a big part of my spiritual life is that faith, an undergirding faith that God is there and has my back to make it just, yeah, again, a kind of a basic statement, a tangible statement. I've always had that. I'm grateful for that. I know that that's where the atheist can push against that, but it just is. I got to admit that I have that. I can't deny that I feel a security, to use your word, that it is not all up to me. Thank goodness that my drive to work today is not 100% up to my ability to foresee an accident. That I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to, pray like it's up to God, act like it's up to me kind of thing. But I do have that. I'm so grateful. I want that for my kids, for others to have that feeling of it is not all up to me. That's a primary, again, very tangible piece of my faith and spirituality. And what brought me to Christ, I'd say to God to begin with, in a big sense, was just being out in the woods. It was up in Fort Collins, Colorado at 19 years old, looking around by myself on a hike, looking around and going, man, I can't not believe that this was divinely created. And as I go up, go forward in life, to see the glory and the majesty and miraculousness that I see of life, I can't believe that just happened. And then just the personal experiences that I would say are on the good and evil side. I'm reading a book right now I want to share with you guys from John Mark Comer. He's the guy who wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He's got a new book called, I don't know, I gave it to our buddy Todd for his time away at the monastery. I think it's called Live No Lies, but it's talking about good and evil. So I'm going to have him on the show, but I want to talk to you guys about it. But I have a staunch faith in the reality of the forces of good and evil that I can't not believe in because of my experiences. So those are kind of those values in there. And what do I do, from daily practices is that trying to start the day off with getting my spiritual lens on. And I think more and more as I grow, as I mature, as I'm more self-aware and being present in the day-to-day, I've taken that breath and palms up, as our buddy Dustin would say, palms up, and give this day and this moment and this decision to Christ. But again, I want to say to you guys, you've both been influences on me over the years in that.
I like this discussion on confidence. We David Wright, who's our head coach at Ziegler, says that coaching is a transfer of confidence. And when you look at people who get shook to the foundation and you kind of watch which way are they going to go? Are they going to give up? Or are they going to go on? You can tell where their confidence is coming from. Right? If your confidence is from God, right? If that transfer, because look at, in a way, God's a coach, right? And if that confidence is coming from there, it's never shaken. I mean, physically, we're going to still go through the pain and the anguish and all the things that we do as physical beings and spiritual beings, but the confidence. And then I compare that, and this is where I go. This is my morning couch time when I'm thinking about these things. I look at some of the tragedies that we're seeing today, whether it's ministries that are being taken down. I know the Southern Baptist Convention's going through a lot. And you see where people have made decisions and justified them based on confidence from within themselves rather than a spiritual confidence. And I'll give an example. When something happens in a ministry or in a convention where there's a victim and the leadership doesn't run to the victim and say, oh my gosh, we had no idea, let's help. Let's do anything we can to help. And yet they pull back and they say, wait a second, the ministry is more important than that one person. So we've got to cover it and hide it and and disregard the victim because the ministry is too important. Well, what that is a display of that God's not capable of handling everything. It's a lack of confidence, right? God's not going to take care of this. Like, wait a second, the creator of the universe, the one who gives me the ultimate confidence, he's going to penalize me or his kingdom because we're doing the right thing. He's got a bigger and better plan. And so I just shake my head where if the ultimate confidence comes from God, we do what we can do, and we're told to do good. I mean, it's pretty clear the direction that we're given. And when we do that, God's got the rest of it. It's like to think that a ministry or our business is dependent on us alone when we do right. It's the confidence is coming from the wrong place.
I appreciate that, Tom. I just had a conversation a couple of days ago with somebody who is doing some work with me, and we're talking about that. When I start losing confidence, start losing faith, I start finagling things. And that's my personal red flag. And that's the vernacular I use. It's one thing to try to influence something, to try to control something, to try to do due diligence. When I start finagling, I know I'm in trouble. That's when I'm lacking confidence, probably in somebody or in God's orchestration of this. And I'm making an executive decision because I want to do justice to these folks. This is going to be a two-part recording here because we're already going long, but this is what's relevant. So
this could be a 7-part recording.
It honestly could. The next one is relationships, which is a great one to come after spiritual, because we're talking about the relationship with our spiritual life, with our God, with the entities that we do and don't recognize, but then just relationships. And to expand on those, from we obviously think of family to think of friends. And here we are as a group of friends. But Randy, you start off with what hit you with the things that you value, those motives behind relationships, and then what you put in place, the habits to practice those.
So I think you guys would all agree that probably there's kind of a thread of each spoke that goes through each spoke.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So in relationships, my realization as an older person who's really not old, but middle years, and I'm so grateful for these recent years where my parents are approaching 80. I'm mid 50s. My kids are now mid teens, and perspective. And then I have relationships with you, with friends, with employees, I have a relationship with work, with money, and this word relationship, I wish there was kind of a better word. We were talking earlier, I think, about love, right? Like, it's just unfortunate that in English, in American English, love is the word for love, because that's terrible. Where you can love hot dogs or love swimming or love your wife or love whatever. Like, how did that ever happen? Because it has really hurt our relationships.
Speaking of words, I pulled that out the other day, love, and the different types, and you've got, 4 types, 7 types. I mean, people extrapolate out, but you've got, eros love, and you've got agape love, and you've got those. I like that. That would be a great one to say. I
eros you. No, not you.
Yeah.
I mean, phileo you.
Yeah, exactly. How you refer to that hot dog with the appropriate love language.
Okay. So in the relationships, and the same thing with relationship, that word where we say, oh, it's not a religion, it's a relationship, or, oh, it's not my marriage is not a roommate relationship. It's not a roommate love. It's this kind of thing over here. And I'm like, gosh, it's so burdensome to try to have to explain it. Like, in English, we do have to say, well, this is what I mean by love. And so relationships, and where I'm landing now is to say, oh my goodness, that word, I would argue now, or I'm learning that we could say it's foundational to foundation, meaning God is. So scripture says a few things about God is this, and one thing is love, but I would say relationship. So in this world that we are in, existential reality is only relationships. And so, and it's exemplified by this Trinitarian reality of God is too multifaceted to be just one, and he's also too unified to be many. And it's this mystery. And so now I'm approaching my parenting through the lens that I first have to be in a proper relationship with God in order for me to say, hopefully, I cannot control my 16-year-old in the way he thinks, but I have influence, I have presence, I'm in time and rhythm with him. And so it's so I'm coming back to the idea that everything is relationship. And not to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm going to say it because I get to come at it from the physics as a physician side of things, that you are in relationship with your body and your liver's in relationship with your thyroid, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then indeed, Jesus in Colossians is saying, yeah, I hold all things together. Okay, well, this increases my confidence in my relationship with God. And if I am then, fumbling through these words in my relationship with Marcy, and we are striving down that pathway. So now it's, okay, well, what do you do? And I think, okay, where I am now is I'm striving to speak this into myself, into you, in friends, the employees, the work, and my family, that is the prime mission field for me right now, or that's where I am, and and in the time and rhythm, and in Acts, and we are in the time and place that God has put us, and so here we are. So each person, each patient, each hour or whatever is a prayer-filled relational. I have a relationship with that time, with that person, with this presence. And so that's my action item right now, is to be orienting myself, rearranging how I'm spending my time in preparation for a patient or dinner time or whatever, with that end.
Yeah, it makes me think of it.
Sense?
Yeah, the word investment is what I kept coming to as you were talking about, and even as I thought about this for myself. But to start with, for me, you saying that we're in relationship with everything. You said as a physician, with our body, with our whatever. It was to speak of Robin Sharma for the second time when I asked him to walk through the habits here in the Ziegler Wheel of Life, and I asked about relationship. He was the first person to say, well, the first relationship, most important one, is self, is the relationship that he had with himself. Now, as you bring up God, I think a lot of our faith-based brethren would say, no, God is first. I question that a little bit. I see. Yeah.
So daily in the practice, it is one of our chief cornerstones is the word relationship. And I will say to people, many of our patients are believers, and I'll say, but your first relationship, God ordained that your first relationship was with self.
Okay.
As a child, you cannot have a relationship with God in the way that we think of relationship with God, because you don't even know your own self.
Yeah.
And then that also brings in selfishness and sin and those we are self-oriented to begin with. And then we have to reorient ourselves on God and these other kinds of relationships that we're talking about today.
Well, and so that was, again, obviously impacting to me to sort of think about, and I have to remind myself, relationship, my first investment is with me. That's how I then am able to connect with my relationship with God. And then from there, others. And that's so stout to me, that my foundation, my rudder of how I relate to others, good and bad, starts with how I relate to myself. And as I get older, and I think hopefully wiser, or at least have more insight, realizing that, I'm the crux, the guy I'm looking at in the mirror is where my relationships start. But guys, I think it was writing my book, maybe latter part of last year, something like that, thinking through this discussion of relationships, that I found myself pondering, if I woke up And this is so, it's been so impacting to me ever since. If I woke up tomorrow, everything's the same. One of those dystopian movies, but everything's not wrecked. Everything's just the same. Everything's humming along, but there's just no people. Just period. There's no people. Zero.
Just you.
It's just me. My first thought is, I have no motive. My motive to live, to take the next breath just went away. I can go drive a Porsche 200 miles an hour along the interstate. Let's pretend sushi's still not, it hasn't gotten moldy yet, so I can eat my fill. I can, do whatever. How long would that be fun for without another soul? And it's just me. And if I know that, different than the dystopian movies, I'm not going off with a purpose of searching for somebody else, because I know that there's nobody else. There is no purpose. It really kind of leveled me of realizing that, oh my gosh, it made me even think of the monk, Thomas Merton, who, when I first started reading his stuff, I was a little judgmental, because I thought, seriously, the dude's, and I'm paraphrasing, he's off in a cave for 3 years, just him and God. Is that really enough? Like, he's not going to serve somebody? And it was later, in coming back to that, I realized he was still engaged in relationship with himself, with God. And he wrote like 54 books. That was his way of trying to impart, trying to have purpose with other people. And again, brought me to that aspect of, man, we so find purpose. Like we talked about this morning with our guys, we find our purpose and fulfillment in mattering to others, I think. So that's just so paramount to me as I look at my work and bring myself back to my desire to matter to others is selfish. And I think, altruistic in the same way. So, but back to your word then. So how do I practice those values out? To me, the word investment is number one. I am an introvert. I am happy alone, and I can do that. And yet I'm grateful for the accountability of doing the shows. So Tom, every week, at least once a week, you and I come on to a show, and we always start off with, hey, how you doing? And we may spend 3 minutes catching up. We may spend 30 minutes catching up on life and, kids and marriage and faith and whatnot. Randy, we've got the gift of working in the same office and go through a lot of times seeing each other daily. Sometimes it'll, ebb and flow, but really, in the term of investment, the one that came to mind is however many years ago when I started meeting with guys back then, I think it was Thursday mornings, and realizing the value in it. Even though,
because it takes your time,
even though
it takes your effort.
Most of those mornings I would think, oh my gosh, I just got a lot to do. And I'm looking for a reason to say no.
Yeah.
I know I'm supposed to be in community with other people and accountability and relationship and counsel. And so doing that, and I'm so grateful that has continued forever. I've been doing it for a decade of meeting with a handful of guys, every morning. And it's the same thing with my family. And Tom, I think about you talking about your dad, is the quandary between quantity and quality of time. And at this point, I'm looking for both, as much time as I can spend with my kids, the better, with my family, the better, with friends, the better, and then having quality as well. And just having to, one of you said that, kind of reorient my day and my life around work is not all important. Money's not all important. Whatever value I have in work is not all important. I can't also spend all day with my family because there are things that have to be done in the daily balance of those. And so it's a budgeting. I think a big habit of mine is just the budgeting of time so that I am able to, I'm so incredibly grateful for being self-employed. And I put that out there, not as a holy grail, but for me, it's what allows me, with so many interests, with my hobbies and achievements, which we'll get into in a little while, with my family, to be able to do that. Otherwise it would be difficult for me, again, in my economy. But yeah, you guys are a big part of my relationships. Tom?
Yeah. So let me kind of give a metaphor. I like to make it simple for me. And so I go back to just a matter, we're talking about the 7 spokes on the wheel of life. And so think of a wheel. And in this context, for me, my wheel, God is the hub of the wheel. And so now you've got 7 spokes coming out. And a tube is one of the strongest structures there is. And so think of these spokes coming out of the hub as tubes, right? And in the tube flows relationship. And so this relationship circles the whole tire, the whole wheel, right? It's in every category. It's in the spiritual, it's in the physical, it's in the mental, it's in the every one of these. You have relationships, and Randy was right on that. There's really three relationships that all of us have. We have a relationship with ourselves, we have a relationship with God, and we have a relationship with others. And that's how we're wired. We were created for relationship. We're hardwired. There's been medical studies. We're wired for relationship. You deprive somebody of relationship, and you're dooming them to fate worse than death. I mean, it's just this is the way we were created. I remember a conference, and I was taking a lot of questions. And at the end, one of our coaches came up and said, every problem was different, but every answer was really the same. It was relationships. And I said, yeah, it's pretty much it. It's relationship. And there was I talk about the 75-year Harvard grant study, but basically the study revealed that people who were happy and satisfied with their life in their 90s, it's because their priority was relationships. It wasn't, more financial success or trips or hobbies or, stuff or, it was the quality of their relationships. And so when you start to study relationships are built on trust, right? So if you're going to be a 10 in a category, then you're going to have a lot of trust with the people who are influential in that category. Well, trust stems from integrity. If you don't have integrity, then people can't count on you. Therefore, they can't trust you. And so if you're in the middle of the relationship, you've got to have integrity, which is going back to the spiritual values and virtues that we live our life by. And so then you ask, well, where does integrity come from? And integrity comes from the truth. And so who's the author of truth? Well, that's God. That's the center of the hub, right? And so you can just see how in order to have great relationships, you've got to build them on trust. And that only happens if you're a person of integrity. And integrity is developed and grown and as a result of truth, because truth cannot contradict itself. That's the ultimate integrity. And so then I asked myself, well, how do I build relationships? Well, I got to work on those three relationships every day. One with the Creator, one with myself, and one with others. And so to me, the word is intentionality, right? Because if we're not intentional, we get too busy to go eat, go hang out with our friends, spend time with our kids. At our conference, we had a guest speaker, Owen Fitzpatrick, and he was talking about coaching someone. And this person worked 20 hours a day. And he came to him and he said, I'm a workaholic. I need to break this pattern. And he said, I need to spend more time with his kids. And so they started working on it, and then they're getting together for a session. And he says, yeah, I missed my kid's birthday party because of work. This just happened. And so Owen said, well, when are you going to tell him? And he goes, tell him what? And Owen said, when are you going to tell him, your son, that your work is more important than he is? And he said it was the only time in his practice that he thought he was going to get punched. But it was the change, right? It was the truth. And so we've got to be intentional about what is most important. And we've got to dig into that.
I mean, that's why I love this question, even looking at relationships and asking the question of what do we value? And then how are we going to walk that out? And Tom, as I look at us historically as humans and look at these spokes, I think this is one of the areas that we're saying it's the most important one to us, and probably the one where we have habitually the least intentionality. And I count myself in there as well. A lot of what happens is just by proxy of the environment. If you've got kids and you wake up in the morning, there they are, and you spend time together. But when am I really intentional on what I value and how I walk that out? That's probably my top word for the impetus of what I need to focus on in relationships for health and wellness, which is our next one, health and wellness. Dr. James Keespot. I'm not going to let you start though there. I'm going to start there. Health and wellness. Man, we look at a value there. I mean, that's one that you and I talk about a lot. Tom, you and I do as well. Health and wellness. I mean, that's one that I'm grateful for my desire in that. I know it's not the norm. I was privileged to, go into athletics and be a pro athlete, and that helped me. Though we got a lot of ex-pro athletes who are in terrible health. But I had some great influences in my life, even before you, Randy James, on real health and wellness, on long-term health and wellness. And I got to say today, I'm just grateful that I have an innate desire. I'm inspired to be well because I want to feel well. I hate feeling unwell. And I'm probably a baby in that, the littlest thing. I'm grateful I didn't have to birth children and go through that. I don't know if I could handle it because you go through so long of feeling unwell. So I put such a great value for myself on how I feel and what I'm capable and able of. And some of that's ego as well. Some of it's self-image and ego. And I like that my kids know that I'm highly capable. I like doing bike races still today. And so there's probably, some things I got to watch out there for. I could be addictive on that side with exercise, especially. But I'm grateful that, my exercise is what you say, Randy. What's the best exercise?
The one you'll do.
The one you'll do. It's the one I'll do is what's play for me, is getting out on the trails, getting out in the woods and riding and running. And you and I were talking about, and actually, no, it was with Patrick. What?
We could even say the one you like to do.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Well, we were talking about, so our buddy Patrick, we were talking about Stephen Kotler.
Yeah.
And flow.
Yeah.
And my question to Stephen when I had him on the show is I feel like flow, as he describes it, is best achieved in an area where you have some level of mastery. Yeah. Like you could do it. We talked about that. You could do it skiing. And a physical aspect is pretty good to it for it as well. I can't do it in skiing because I'm not that good. Mountain biking, I can, technical trail running, I can, but even to some point, artistry, when you're doing your art, or Tom, writing, when you're writing something, you can get in an aspect of flow if it's something that you participate in a lot. But anyway, so I have multiple, my relationship with health and wellness, I really like. On the nutrition side, we've, I think, continually evolved into eating cleaner and looking at fasting and those things. And I mean, I'm like a human too. I have appetites that I love to feed. I like my wine and chocolate and coffee and pizza, gluten, and, all that kind of stuff, burgers and whatnot. I like that, but I'm grateful that I've elevated my appetites and keep the harmful things at bay, a little bit minimized, and have learned to really enjoy the things that are more life-giving. But I mean, I value health and wellness a lot, even to a fear standpoint. I fear disability, which I'm going to have to come to grips with at some point, someday, at a lesser ability. But right now I'm grateful to be 51 and still setting PRs and competing at a level. And to undergird that, even as I talk about the physical aspect, knowing that physical being as I stand here is what's housing my brain and giving it its ability to be capable. And in work like what we all have, where there's a lot of creative nature, man, I rely on them. That you wake up in the morning feeling poor. It's really hard to write down anything coherently brilliant. And I want to do that. So it's a motive to be healthy and well. Daily investments, man, I don't have to think about that as much. What we've patterned, you and I have.
I was going to say, you have invested in this, and just like other areas where, like money, if you put in enough money over time, it becomes almost a self-generating thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're getting a return on your investment now. The rhythm is there, the time is there. And just like in the marketplace, that doesn't guarantee your security is still in God. World War III could happen. The money goes away, and so could your health.
Yeah.
But you've invested in it.
I have a great blue zone, as we so often talk about. And when we sit out on the deck and have our food, it's usually leftovers from the night before, and it's veggies and, maybe a meat and some good carbs, some brown rice or whatnot, or quinoa or something like that. And so we eat well and keep the harmful inflammatory things at a minimum. There's cycles, but that daily investment, and that's, something that we've taken into our families and we talk about there. So, man, I'm grateful for my desire for wellness and the ability to pursue that in the blue zone with guys like you who think similarly. Well, Tom, how about you, man?
Wow. So this is, the spokes for me. This is the one that I was just blessed with the ability to retain anything that I eat.
Yeah.
I'm really, really good at that. And so it's always, since I was raised on Cocoa Puffs and sweet tea. I mean, 6 years old. That's
You're a proper Texan.
So it's been something that, it's constantly on my radar. It's got to be intentional. And I can go for months with intentionality and then slack off and boom. It's like my body's like, ooh, this is good, right? Which isn't good for me. So it's a constant battle. And the way I get back on track is there's got to be a higher purpose associated with it. One of the things I write about in the book Choose to Win is that your physical health either limits or unleashes your potential. I mean, it's the driver. A lot of people, when I'm going to get on track, I'm going to set goals. They start with the physical goals, which is fantastic. You should, because if you can make headway and progress physically, you're going to have more energy. You're going to have more clarity. At the same time, though, people join the gym in January and quit in February. And so short-term success is better than no short-term success. But at the same time, you've got to work on the spiritual and the mental, because those are the two things that are actually going to have the long-term impact in you staying in better shape. I was hunting around, one of my habits is to put the right input in. So whenever I see a new study about, physical health, I like to read it. And so the one I read last week was the number one indicator of somebody gaining weight over the next 6 months is starting a diet.
That's acutely, harshly true.
Yeah. And it's because it's not holistic. It's not relational. It's not for a higher purpose. It's you wake up one day and everything's tight and you don't want to go buy new clothes and somebody's made a comment. And so you're operating out of fear and other things rather than, wait a second, I was created for more. Right. And it's a different relationship. So the physical has been something, and like I'm 60 pounds lighter than off of my heaviest. So for a lot of years I was 255, 260. I still got an extra 20 I need to get rid of. It's like the 20 that's like my best friend. I don't know what the deal is.
The comfort 20.
I don't know. Yeah. So, but the thought that got me off of that lost the 60 was I was literally following my routine, praying for, I just felt icky. And I was like, God, my word for the year was 2 words. It was pure and simple. I just wanted to be pure and I wanted to be simple. And it was in a spiritual, mental context. It had nothing to do with the physical. And then this thought comes into my head, and I think something happened. I think maybe God did a download, and he said, why don't you eat pure? It's like, oh, what does that mean? And so that's kind of like man, when I'm doing good, I'm eating pure physically.
Yeah.
And pure just means the way God made it. No chemicals, no processing, nothing that's got multi-syllable words in it. And because when I dug into it, it was like food the way God made it. And it's amazing what happens when you do that. And then I think about every area of our life. What if we just said, hey, I want to be pure in my relationships. I want to be pure in my spiritual walk. I want to be pure in my career. And so the word I would use for the physical is just pure. And, if somebody's going to give you a bar of gold that weighs, 5 pounds, what purity do you want it? Do you want it like 20% pure, or do you want it like 99.999? Yeah. It has more value. Well, would you trade your life for a 5-pound bar of gold? No, we wouldn't. So that's, the highest standard, striving for purity. You fall short every day. I mean, I think you could probably drink tap water and it's not as pure as it could be.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe the word is purer.
We can always be more, we can be purer for sure. Yeah. And you talking about that pure, and my thought was we're in a convenience culture. We know that. We talked about a microwave culture for so long, and to eat that way is not as convenient as that off the middle shelves in the grocery store, processed food that is ready to eat in 1 minute in the microwave or whatnot. But in your aspect about diet, yeah, that is an interesting stat they pulled out there, because we generally look at diet as a short-term result as opposed to what you're leading your patients in. And what's the diet you want to engage with forever, in essence, for the person you want to be and what you value. And the thing that's been on me too with health and wellness, especially in regards to weight and health overall, is seeing that when aesthetics, which is our biggest driver, but when that is the driver, I see the least sustainability. Even though I am very aware of the aesthetics. I mean, I have to look good and to look, trim and fit and whatnot. And yet what keeps me going most is what you and I talk about. It's who I'm going to be when I'm 80 is really the core driver. And I'm grateful for that, because it was just aesthetics. It's too easy to let it go. And I don't see people sustain it as well.
It's harder for me to land on things in this area, because
what do you think about health and wellness, Dr. Health and Wellness?
So with respect to time and not going down the rabbit hole, my thoughts on this today to say, okay, here we all are in our middle years. We're not 80. And the answer to what kind of guy are you going to be at 80? And I was like, well, I'm going to look at you now and your habits, and I'm going to make a strong bet as to what kind of guy you're going to be then.
Yeah.
And so Tom, I wrote this down because you're a guy that said, gosh, all the problems are so different, but the answer is the same. And no kidding. I mean, I think we could say that about finances, and we could absolutely say that about medicine, where now we have the ICD-10 codes, 162,000 names for things that can go wrong, all the problems. But what's the answer? And we're back to these very not simple, well, they are simple, but they're profound, they're deep. What are the answers for what is health, what is wellness, and how then do we be ourselves, and how do we then our families, how do we help them be? And in my case, it's a profession. And the word physician, looking it up, I've been doing a lot of that. And do you know where it comes from? So physics, okay, I won't try to say the Latin and Greek, but physis means nature. And so physics is, how do things work? And a physician is trying to say, well, how do things work in the body? And I would say, okay, what's the relationship that your body has with itself? And the most core intimate one there, I don't think people would argue against this, is your brain, which is the house of your mind, which is the house of your soul. And so that relationship of brain, mind, or body and soul is where I think the crux is. Like, why would you do anything? Well, you want to be becoming the kind of guy at 50, whatever, 60, 70, 80. But the crux of it is going to be, I want to have a mind. I want to be thinking. I want to be in relationship with myself, with God, with my wife, with my family. And I want to have mission, passion, purpose, and all of that. Well, God designed it that, hey, your brain is in your body. And what's good for your brain is good for your liver and your thyroid and your skin and everything else. And so as we're looking at this whole thing, there's thousands of ways we could describe pathology. And there's a few ways that we describe true medicine. And those are the things that you do have control of how do you put things in your body, through your mouth, through your eyes, your ears, your skin. How do you move? What kind of product do you produce? What kind of words do you say to your wife? What kind of attitude do you wake up with? You have control. You have the creation, I would say, that God created freedom, that the imprint or the image of God in us is decision, is freedom, is free will, is a mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can eat this or eat that. And there's a time and a place for just about everything, including Cocoa Puffs, but pretty darn rare. You've had enough, like pretty rare.
But they're fortified with 8 essential vitamins and iron.
Okay, so if it keeps you from death, that would be one time. And we all have our cake and ice cream on our birthday and those kind of things in this relationship with food. And so there it is. That's my kind of hierarchy of the way of thinking about it. But I had something new to say to you guys today. What is the number one thing that's likely to take the three of us out of commission? What area of pathology? I think I already told you this.
Yeah, I don't remember, so it's still
Okay.
new.
I was going to say you can't answer. We're going to put Thomas.
No.
Or just what's first thought in your head? Like what's
take me out?
Yeah, that's going to take you out of what you would call your best life, your true life.
Well, of course, I can think me personally or statistically.
Statistically, people.
Oh,
that
man.
Let's say you're middle-aged, you're secure in finances, somebody's not going to shoot you, you're not living in a war zone or safety thing. Food is there.
I don't know. Car wreck, cancer.
What do you think?
Loneliness.
Wow. Okay. Loneliness. That's a curious answer. My answer is musculoskeletal.
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. That is a close second. Musculoskeletal. Okay. Explain.
Well, because here we are. And so, Tom, you're right. If your metabolism, if you could have been born 1,000 years ago, you would have been the chief of the village and you would have put me to shame because I can't gain weight. So I'm so much more dependent upon the next meal than you are. But then when you're born into a time when the next meal is jumping into you from everywhere, then your metabolism is the one that's a problem. And you said that, yeah, you got to think about it. Okay. So that's kind of on the metabolic side. I like your answer of loneliness though. But I would say the chances, I'm not going to bet on loneliness for you. So you said statistically, and I mean more us.
Yeah.
The thing is because what we do every day is we don't move the way the body was designed to move. We sit. And then when we do move, and even in your case where it's like, it's furious activity for an hour, and then you go sit.
It's sedentary the rest of the day. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. True.
And that's a red. So as I'm learning and reading and thinking and say, the thing that's most likely that you're an 80-year-old not doing what you want to do is not loneliness. It's not a heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Because I know you, and I don't think those are going to be it. It's musculoskeletal. It's that shoulder, that back, that knee, that hip. For me, it's that puffiness of joint awareness.
Yeah.
That is going to be the lingering slow decline. So for my 55th year, right now for next year. That's my action item then, is to say, okay, what's my relationship with the kind of things that I have control over that are taking me out of strength through range of motion?
Yeah. It makes me think of, towards that thing, especially the manly thing, especially the past athletes. You got that nagging thing, man. You just grin and bear it, and gut it out. I don't want to do that. Last year I had a lipoma. So, what's the layman's terms?
A fatty tumor
On my back, and had our buddy chiropractor saying, I think it's impinging on some things and causing some pain and lack of range of movement, whatever. Anyways, I don't want to be the old guy who can't do that. And so I got surgery. They went in and
remember how we talked about your neck and how it's kind of angled forward and biking and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So another buddy of ours, David, who does the 100-mile runs, was laying down on the floor. His head won't go all the way back. He can't put his head down on the floor. And he asked me, he says, that abnormal? I'm like, yeah. So I hooked him up with Stefan over here. And I'm like, that's a significant but he didn't even know it. Here he is, 60, whatever. And it's like, I can't lay flat on the floor. That's going to impinge your activity in the future.
And even from an athletic standpoint, we know the guy, here in Colorado, you see the guy who's 90 and he's still shuffling along doing a marathon and whatever. And which is cool, better than the guy in the wheelchair or on the couch or whatever, but without doing some things to enhance and keep that range of motion. I don't want to be that either, which is what motivates me to get down and do my push-ups and planks and burpees and pull-ups and dips and stuff. Because otherwise I don't care to do those. I'm not super inspired to do those. They're not fun like running and riding. So no, it's interesting to hear. I want to say a couple of things on what you talked about. Physician. My thought culturally is when people hear what's the purpose of a physician or what's that mean, is more just fixer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The unfortunate, it's not keep me healthy. It's just fix me so I can get back up when I break, when I have a pathology. That's how we think about it.
I would agree. It's fixer.
Errant view. And then, you talking about food, as you were talking, I was thinking again about that cultural perspective. I think we have of food. We're like a wood burning stove, man. Just throw anything in there that it can burn and we're good. And that we're not wood burning stoves, that food I'm taking in is the building blocks of my eyes. I was looking at your eyes and the ability for me to keep seeing and not to get, a decline in my eyesight, in my skin, in my hair, in my whatever is looking at the food as a building block, or back to the Asian or, the Eastern perspective of food as medicine. Man, we just do not. That's why when you so often think, man, don't people know this? Obviously not. we don't know this. So we got to keep talking about it. And so you did talk about, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, that as of this new format of the show on Fridays now, folks, that I'm publishing. We've only done 2 so far, maybe 3 as of this recording, of Functional Fridays, where Randy and I get on and we talk and go through the pillars, in essence, of health and wellness initially, but then we get into specific things from Alzheimer's to metabolism to autoimmune.
It really is like you're listing now those 162,000 ways we can go wrong. And by the way, the ICD 11 is coming out next year, I think. And I think it goes up to 200,000+ somethings. And one of those is actually aging. So in case you didn't know this, everybody is now born with a disease, which implies dependency, lack of freedom, lack of free will. I need a government. I need an insurance. I need something. I'm
a day older. Thus I'm handicapped.
Therefore you are diseased.
I'm becoming.
So we live in a cultural time where this is really, really tough. But again, all 162,000 autoimmune, whatever else. And of course we say the same things all the time. Autoimmune. Okay. Let's talk about diet through autoimmune. We want to lose some weight. Okay. Let's not just do a diet, but we're going to talk about the whole 7 spokes of everything as it pertains to where do you feel called to weigh and why, and what's that going to do? And then of course your mind and just the crux of that interplay of all of those kind of things. Yeah. Now we could go down the rabbit hole.
Well, and as people hear this, I don't know what shows will publish, but you and I do one. We do a talk on ageism. I don't think that will have published yet. And And yeah, you're talking about ICD codes. And for people to hear that, that's what a doctor like Randy has to give you a code to say, this is what's wrong. If you're going to have a treatment, if you're going to have a referral to another specialist or get a prescription.
Or if you're going to hope that your insurance company
Yeah.
pays for, they're
Yeah.
paying for the code.
Yeah. And we just did a show with Sarah Fay and talked about the mental aspect, which is the same concept, the DSM, where they have the codes there. And yeah, there's more and more all the time. It reminds me, we have a game called Fun Employed, where you, it's just, it's a game we play at the house with the kids, and you have like I need a janitor, and everybody has these cards. They got to take their cards and make a case for why they would be a good janitor. But you get like a fifth card, and it's your saboteur card. So the person next to you, so they try to sell themselves, and you say, okay, yeah, but, and you have your saboteur card. And one of them is, they have every problem ever. And it's just the funniest one to our family and to me, because it comes up like that. At this point, I've got every ICD code and DSM code ever. It's a bad place to be.
So let me ask the panel a question.
The panel.
So I read years ago that our Western medical system is really based on Newtonian physics. And the presumption was that our DNA is coded and there's nothing we can do about it. And so that's why surgery and pills are a great solution, because it doesn't really matter what you do anyway, you've got it. But then quantum mechanics comes out and basically says, wait a second, we're really energy. And the way we think about things, we can see at the cellular level differences in a positive or a negative attitude. Well, I think, I look at you two guys on the screen, and pretty strong statements for a picture outwardly of what good health looks like, right? Physically fit, BMI is probably right on, probably body fat is way lower than the average human being for your age in the United States. I mean, all these things are there, but you cannot change a belief with evidence, because belief is a feeling. It takes feelings to change a belief. And so somewhere along the way, your belief changed about, wait a second, we do have agency. We can think differently, eat differently, do different things in our life that changes our physical physiology, our health, and everything else. And then I go back to Dad's original quote, you are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. And you can change what you are and where you are by changing what goes into your mind. And so when I look at this picture of health standing in front of me, my thought goes back to my little quote that says, what you feed your mind determines your appetite. And so I'm wondering, what do you think, with all that context, is successful physical health really because you're constantly focused on how can I be weller? And you hang out with people who are also focused on how can I be weller? And Randy, your higher calling is to help people be weller. And you start with the physical piece of it and then branch out. Kevin, your higher calling is to help people be weller. And you start with whatever that person's purpose is, and then it branch out to all the things. But both of you are constantly focused on that. So I don't know if I had a question there, but my question is, how much of your physical wellness is because you believe quantum, not Newtonian, and you hang out with people who believe the same thing, and you don't leave to chance reading stuff that's going to help you move forward?
A lot. We're smiling at you, Tom, because we've chewed on that very thought for so long of if you asked, well, how often do you get sick? And we gave an answer, once every something. Oh, well, that's less than the average. Well, what do you do to not get sick? Nothing and everything. And one of the, I'm so grateful because it's kind of that thing of nobody can set out. You can't try really hard to not get sick today. But I know that and we would bet on each other, right? Like that, that even goes into, you have value in your wellness that we should share. That I know how he lived his life in the past few, months or years. And so I'm going to bet that probably tomorrow there's less chance of XYZ illness. And I also know that because of the layering of the mind, of the way of the thinking and that kind of thing, that we don't think about getting sick and trying not to get sick. We are always thinking about wellness and building peace and joy and satisfaction and fitness and sleep. And I think then if you get into the evidences to try to convince somebody else to go to bed on time and to eat right and don't smoke and exercise and blah, 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 at some point in their journey, they have to engage in those things too. But I think the answer to your question is a lie. And that the mystery of the genetic Newtonian side, because that's also very real. Doesn't matter. Well, you already talked about this today. I don't care really what that kid thinks, but he's not a dog, right? But you just gave him evidence that, hey, if you think it hard enough, you could become dog-like. And there is evidence of that, right? If you think illness and sickness or wellness hard enough, you have an increased chance of manifesting those things. But can you name it and claim it? And just because of something or other, I would believe not. But we spoke this morning about Kevin can't try really hard to speak German. But could he become the kind of guy who could think in German in a few months or years? You could. And so now we're back to what our discussion today is. Well, what is wellness? What is health? What is happy? And now how do we rearrange all of our affairs through all of these spokes to be becoming the kind of people who are more likely to say, I don't have a cold today. Or, I did the 15th pull-up. That was my goal. And maybe tomorrow is 16, or maybe I'm happy with 15. And through everything. And I'll also say, Tom, because you also spoke that question and statement very intelligently by saying, or by very normal American intelligence, but what you can't see is the state of Kevin's, I don't know if I pick on you, his skin. Mm-hmm. What you can't see is the state of my joints. If I was going to say, oh, what's wrong with me is my joints feel too stiff. And every American looks at me and say, well, you must be fit, or you must be healthy, or you must eat this, or you must whatever. And I'm like, you don't know. And we live in this culture that makes those kind of aesthetic judgments and assumptions. And I'm so sorry, because so many people are under a painful emotional burden because of that. And it makes it harder to then believe, to switch the beliefs, to engage in this process, whether it's spiritual or financial or personal or physical, and all of those things, because it's just so hard. Or our culture, right? Like you can't go into a culture of 1,000 years ago where you're lucky to eat every third day, right? Like I would be much more prone to disease in that culture because of a metabolic, genetically influenced reality. You would be much more resilient, right? We didn't ask to be born in this time or place or whatever, but here we are. And so we have to make decisions. You are, I don't know if you know this, but you are a Caucasian male. Are you okay with that? So there's some assumptions there, right? You can, and our culture these days is also now bending these words of what is Caucasianness, right? Or Blackness or Asianness or whatever. And I would be the first to say, yeah, we've done that really badly. There's sin and woundedness and all of that. And male, female, we've gotten ourselves confused on now. But somehow we're not confused on the fact that I am 54 and 73 inches tall. And even if I identify as 75, then okay. So for people to then take all of these points into their head, because you still have to start with a diet and awareness. You still have to begin. You still have to engage in these ideas. But if you don't do it holistically with awareness of your mind and your relationship with God and why you would be doing these things, then if you're faking it through a budget just because you want to afford that one thing but you don't have a lifelong budget, then you're still going to struggle with that, and you're not going to. And that's how people do the whole American wellness journey.
I do.
Disaster.
I do love the question though, Tom, because we've talked about that before. Do we not just to take sick? Do we get sick less often because of all the things?
I don't think we're going to get sick.
Well, yeah, but because I always want to go to it's because of the food and the exercise and the, those intentional tangible things, or how much of it is the placebo kind of thing, working in there going just because we.
Yes. But to tie it to what he said, the placebo is not a nothingness. It is quantum energetic reality.
No, I think I'm with you. Maybe more, the most powerful thing, honestly, is that supplement, whether it has the right ingredients and is it going to help me?
You believe it helps
or
you.
The fact that I believe that it helps me. And I get called out on that a lot because I do often want to look at the tangible things, exercise and food and whatever, as opposed to, no, I just think of myself, like you said, I like that. Think of myself as the kind of guy who does X, who is capable of X. And that's what gives me the motive to actually do those things. And it has infinitely powerful reaction, to the actual goodness that exists in me as well.
Yes.
Yep. So the sequence I see is that relationships and thinking influence the belief. Belief influences the actions you're going to take. And those actions that you take, they get a result, right? Good or bad, they get a result. And so I believe on it in two ways. I believe because you're thinking on these things and having relationships with people who believe the same, that influences your belief into an action, and the action, the follow through. Like if you did all that stuff and there was no action afterwards, right? You still ate Twinkies, right? You're not going to get the results. And the placebo is unbelievable. I was just at our conference. They shared the smoothie placebo. Have you heard the smoothie placebo?
What's that?
So there's a hormone or a chemical released in your body that is your hunger mechanism, right? And so they took this smoothie, and to half the people they gave the smoothie, they said, look, this is a rich, luxurious, fat-laden smoothie. You're going to love it. And then they do the blood test an hour later to see what's going on with the hunger thing. They all have a suppressed appetite. They take the same smoothie, they go to the other half of the people, and they say, oh, this is a lifestyle smoothie. It's light. It is going to give you the nutrition that you need, right? And an hour later, they do the blood and they're hungry. Their appetite is up. Because one of them was thinking high calorie, this is going to fill me up. The other group was thinking, wow, I'm going to feel good, but there's not any calories in it. Man, I hope it's good. So
I have to comment on that. I will dig up that. I might email you and say, hey, where's the reference? And I'm going to infuse it with another one. So they measured the actual leptin or ghrelin or whatever those.
It was ghrelin. It was ghrelin that they measured.
Okay. So that is a real measurable chemical. Okay. So now we're going to take another experiment that has been done, and there's 20 Kevin Millers over there and they don't change a thing. They do Kevin. There's 20 Kevin Millers right here, and you pick up your 30-pound dumbbell, and every day you do that thing, say 10 times to the point of failure.
There we go.
And you do that 3 times a day for 30 days. And then there's 20 Kevin Millers over here, and you realistically think. You don't move your arm.
Mm-hmm.
You think through lifting that weight. You know how much that weight is. You think through how much it is to the point of failure. Will the guy who lifts the weight, will his bicep be demonstrably bigger, measurably bigger, stronger?
No.
Will the guy who thinks it, is it measurably bigger? Yes. Not as big as actually doing it, but is it bigger than the guys that don't do any different?
Mm-hmm.
How can that be? So is that, again, is that part of the image bearing of God, that we have the capacity? It is mind over literal matter, literal substance, that I can't think $1 million in my hand right here, right? Like that's what people think of when they think of, or back to cold. And I would tell my son, look, it's mind over matter. You got to go to school anyway. I know you're feeling a little bit off, but you'll forget about it and whatever. Well, he doesn't want to. He wants to lay on the couch and be sick.
Yeah.
That reality to me, which is buried somewhere in quantum energetic mechanics, the speed of light. And I think we're back to Colossians 1:17. In him, all things hold together. And he's inviting us into this deeper, like you said, it's always deeper. It's always mysterious, or there's always something weller, and we're invited into it. We're invited into the mystery of participating in this, which is, like you said, Kevin, is I'm so curious.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in this. I want to participate.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings to me just the power of expectation. Kind of back to what you talked about, Tom, with diet. If I'm doing that for a short-term result, as opposed to the power of deciding who I want to be, back to the values,
decision,
and
agency.
saying, I think of myself, I am the kind of guy who does X, is X, that alone has X amount of power. And then as it motivates me to do those activities, it adds upon that. And it's a compound effect of that. Yeah. Power of expectation.